Okay, welcome to the next lesson about Parmenides. We spoke about Heraclitus. Now, we've already contrasted the two. You should, if you watch that video, you will see that Parmenides is the opposite of Heraclitus. He doesn't believe that change is possible. The world of change and becoming is illogical, irrational, and an illusion for Parmenides. Therefore, our senses, our eyes, our ears, our taste, our sense perception is unreliable. Now that's very important because the previous three philosophers, Thales, Anaximander and Heraclitus, were all empiricists in some way. They used the inductive method, which means they looked at the world, they tested their ideas about the world, and if the world acted how they thought it would act, then it was some kind of proof, not 100% proof, but it was a good reason to believe that maybe their model was correct. This is known as the scientific method, or the inductive method, or the empirical method. But Parmenides claims that that's not the method we should be using. We should be using a deductive method. He was an extreme rationalist, which means that he doesn't believe the external world is necessary. Perception of the external world is not necessary to understand it. We can actually understand the entire world through deduction, not through induction, but through deduction. Now, Pythagoras is another example of someone who is very much a fan of the deductive method. And mathematics is a subject which uses the deductive method. The inductive method is favoured by science, and they are different because mathematical proofs, when somebody creates a mathematical proof, they don't use anything in the external world to prove something from mathematics. You don't do an experiment, whereas in science an experiment is necessary, and there is no such thing as proof in science using this method. You just say that one model is perhaps more likely to be correct than another one which has been shown to be definitely incorrect. So he just used his mind and logic to come up with the following arguments. Now here are some examples of his arguments. Empty space is nothing. Nothing is non-being. Non-being can't exist. Yeah. And so, therefore, empty space cannot exist. He didn't believe there was any empty space between the objects. It's simply impossible, and therefore movement, which requires empty space, is also impossible. Okay, another argument of his. Something cannot come from nothing. He believes it's impossible for something to come from nothing. This is still a very common idea, and I think we all agree with Parmenides here, even though we may disagree with his conclusions. It's certainly a scientific principle, perhaps it's true, perhaps it's not, but that something cannot come from nothing. I think nowadays with quantum mechanics, a lot of quantum theorists, theoretical scientists, theoretical physicists, I should say, they would say that something can come from nothing, that you have virtual particles that appear out of the void and go back into the void, and this reminds me of very much of Anaximander, that definite qualities come from this indefinite place. So they may claim that something can come from nothing. What do you think? Is it possible for something to come from nothing, or is it impossible? He also states that something cannot go to nothing. It can't just disappear out of existence.